In the ancient mountain kingdom of Valarath, where dragons soared above snow-capped peaks and their roars echoed through every valley, there lived a 16-year-old girl named Moja. Moja was not like the other children of Valarath. She did not have golden armor, nor a family sword passed down from warrior parents. She did not have a proud father who trained her in battle formations, or a mother who braided dragon-scale charms into her hair. What Moja had was quieter and far more powerful. Moja was blind. She had been born without sight, into a world that had long decided sight was everything. The people of Valarath believed that only those who could look a dragon in the eye, who could hold its blazing golden gaze without flinching, could ever hope to tame one. Dragon riders were the greatest warriors in the kingdom, and every child dreamed of being chosen at the grand choosing ceremony held once every 4 years. Every child except Moja, who had stopped dreaming of it long ago. She lived with her grandmother, Nanabrak, in a small stone cottage at the edge of the whispering forest. While the other children of the village practiced sword drills and memorized dragon lore from thick illustrated books, Moja learned by touch, by sound, by scent. She knew the name of every herb in the forest by its smell. She knew the temperature of the wind, the texture of bark, the weight of rain before it fell. The world speaks to those who are truly listening, Nanabrak always said. Most people are too busy looking to hear it. Moja believed this. She had to. On the morning that everything changed, Moja was up before sunrise, as usual. She walked barefoot through the damp grass behind their cottage, counting her steps precisely 14 to the old oak tree, 7 left to the stream, 12 forward to her favorite rock. She sat, dipped her fingers into the cold water, and listened. The forest was never silent to Moja. It breathed. Today, however, something was different. Beneath the usual chorus of birds and rustling leaves, there was a new sound, low, rhythmic, like a great heartbeat buried in the earth. It was coming from the mountains to the north. Moja pressed her palm flat against the ground. She felt it through her skin, a deep, slow vibration. Not the rumble of thunder. Not the stamp of horses. Something alive. Something enormous. You hear it too, don't you? Said a voice behind her. Moja did not jump. She had heard Doro coming from 15 steps away, the way his left boot scraped slightly on the pebbles, the way he always sniffed once before speaking. Doro was her only friend in the village. He was 16 too, with a quick smile and an even quicker mouth. He was the son of the village blacksmith and had no real talent for dragon riding either. He was allergic to dragon smoke, which made everyone laugh and made him furious. It's coming from the northern caves, Moja said. The old ones, past the Ridge of Sorrows. Nobody goes there, Doro said, sitting beside her. I know, said Moja. But something is there. And it's been there for days. The vibration is getting stronger. Doro was quiet for a moment. Then, the grand choosing is in 1 week. Moja nodded. She had been trying not to think about it. Every 4 years, the dragon masters of Valarath came to the villages and chose young riders. Children would stand before a dragon and the dragon would either roar in rejection or lower its head in acceptance. It was said the dragons chose with their eyes, that they could see a warrior's soul through their gaze. You should go, Doro said quietly. To the choosing? Moja let out a short, bitter laugh. They'd send me home in 5 seconds. No, Doro said. To the northern caves. Whatever is making that sound, I think it wants you to find it. Moja opened her mouth to argue. But she stopped. Because beneath the gentle trickle of the stream and the distant cry of morning birds, the heartbeat in the earth was unmistakable, and it was beating faster now. As if it had heard them, as if it was waiting. They left before the village woke up. Moja carried nothing but a small satchel with water, dried fruit, and her walking staff, a smooth piece of ash wood that Nanabrak had carved for her when she was 7, wrapped in leather at the grip and tipped with copper at the base. With it, she could map the world around her in an instant. The tapping told her distance, texture, obstacle, and depth in a language no book could teach. Doro carried a lantern, a rope, and excessive amounts of nervous energy. He talked the whole way up the mountain trail, partly to feel the silence and partly because silence made him feel the mountains were listening. What if it's a void dragon? He whispered at one point. They say void dragons eat people's shadows and leave them feeling hollow forever. Void dragons aren't real, Moja said. The elders also said I never climb a mountain. She tapped her staff ahead and stepped calmly over a loose rock that Doro promptly stumbled on. The trail wound upward for 3 hours. Moja tracked their progress through the changing sounds around her. The trees thinned, their leaves replaced by the hollow whistle of wind through bare rock. The air grew cooler, carrying the mineral scent of ice and old stone. The ground shifted from soft earth to hard granite beneath her feet, and always, that heartbeat closer now. Stronger. The northern caves were a cluster of deep openings carved by ancient glaciers into the mountain's face. Locals feared them not because of any proven danger, but because of the stories that deep inside, something had slept for centuries, waiting for the right moment to wake. Moja had always thought the stories were meant to keep children away from a dangerous drop. Now, she wasn't so sure. The entrance is big enough to walk through, Doro said, holding his lantern up. I can see claw marks on the walls. Old ones. Really big ones. How far do the marks go in? As far as the light reaches. Which isn't very far. Moja stepped inside without waiting. The moment she crossed into the cave, the air changed completely. It was warm, startlingly warm, like stepping into a room with a fire, except there was no fire. And the heartbeat was no longer just a vibration. It was a sound, low, resonant, alive boom. 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 Moja Doro grabbed her sleeve. Follow me closely, she said. And do not run no matter what you hear. She tapped her way deeper in. The cave walls were smooth on one side, rough on the other. She mapped the path as she went, memorizing every turn. The warmth increased. The heartbeat grew louder. And then she smelled it. It was unlike anything she had ever encountered. Not the sulfur smell she'd been told dragons had. This was more like hot metal, pine resin, lightning after a storm, and something else she had no word for. Something ancient. Something alive and thinking and very, very old. She stopped. In front of her, about 8 steps ahead, she estimated something breathed. Not a small breath. Each exhale moved the air around her like a gust of warm wind. Each inhale was the sound of 1,000 leaves rushing to their branches. Hello, said Moja. Doro made a strangled sound behind her. Then dropped his lantern. It clattered on the stone floor, still lit. There was a long silence. Then, like the slow uncurling of the world itself, something moved in the darkness. And then light, not lantern light. Not sunlight. This light was deep amber gold, pulsing from within, like embers breathing back to life after a long sleep. It came from the creature's scales. From its chest. From its eyes, which opened 2 vast, glowing discs the color of ancient honey, and fixed on the 2 children standing at the edge of its home. Even Moja, who could not see, felt the warmth of that gaze on her skin like 2 small suns. The dragon was immense. Its wings were folded against its sides. Its scales were the deep midnight blue of the sky just before dawn. Its horns curled like ancient ram's horns, wound with cracks of gold light. It was not aggressive. It was not threatening. It was looking at Moja, only at Moja, and then it did something no dragon in the history of Valarath had ever done at a first meeting. It lowered its head to the ground. Not in sleep. In greeting. Doro, Moja whispered, her voice very calm. What is it doing? Doro's voice came out in a squeak. It's bowing. Dragons do not bow. Every child in Valarath learned this. Dragons are proud beyond measure. To earn a dragon's respect, a rider must stand before it without fear, meet its gaze, and prove their worth. The dragon chooses you, not the other way around. A dragon bowing was as impossible as the mountains bowing to the sea, and yet, the great creature's massive head rested on the cave floor, 2 feet from where Moja stood, its amber eyes level with her knees. Up close, she could feel the warmth radiating from its scales in waves, and the sound of its breathing was almost musical, a deep, resonant hum beneath every exhale, like a note played on the world's largest instrument. Moja crouched slowly. She extended one hand, palm up, the way Nana Breck had taught her to greet an unfamiliar animal. Let it decide, never force it. Her fingers were trembling slightly, though she would never admit this to Doro. The dragon's nostril flared. It exhaled a long, warm breath over her hand. It smelled her. Then, with extraordinary gentleness, it pressed the tip of its enormous nose into her palm. Heat bloomed up her arm. Then something else, a sensation she had no name for, like sound translated into feeling, like color turned into temperature. She gasped, images. Not visual images, she had never seen anything but impressions. Feelings. Stories without words. She felt loneliness, immense and long. She felt waiting, patient and certain. She felt recognition, sudden and total, like finding something she hadn't known was lost. You've been waiting for someone, Moja whispered. Someone who could find you without needing to see you. The dragon made a sound deep in its chest, not a roar. Something softer. Confirmation. Moha. Doro's voice was barely audible. I have to tell you something important. Wall. There are markings on the cave wall. Behind the dragon. I can see them from here. He paused. I think they're old Valarath script. The ceremonial kind. The kind they carve to mark important things. What do they say? Moja asked. Very still, Doro's lantern flickered as he moved it closer to read. A very long pause. She who hears the world as it truly is will be chosen by the one who has waited since the first fire. She will not need to see him. He will not need to be seen. Together they will become the greatest rider and dragon Valarath has ever known. Silence filled the cave, then Doro added, there's a name carved beneath it. What name? Solen, he said. The dragon's name is Solen. At the sound of his name spoken out for perhaps the first time in centuries, the dragon lifted his head and let out a sound that shook the cave walls. Not with rage. With something that sounded, impossibly, like relief. Moja smiled for the first time in a very long while. Hello, Solen, she said. I'm Moja. I've been looking for you too. I just didn't know it yet. In the days that followed, Moja returned to the cave every morning before the village woke. And every morning, Solen was waiting, head raised, eyes glowing softly, alert to the exact sound of her footsteps on the mountain path. Even before she reached the cave entrance, she learned him the way she learned everything, by touch, by sound, by pattern. She mapped his body the way she mapped the forest 14 scales from his neck to his left wing joint, the deep rumble that meant he was happy, the low hiss that meant he was thinking, the sharp single exhale that meant he was watching something interesting overhead. She discovered that when she rested her palm flat against the scales below his neck over the warm pulsing heart of him, she could feel what he felt. Not in words. In the same wordless language of sensation she'd experienced at the first touch. Joy was heat. Alertness was a sharp vibration. Calm was a low, slow hum. They were building a language no one had ever spoken before. Solen, for his part, was discovering that Moja noticed things about the world that other riders never would. The change in wind direction 3 minutes before it shifted. The distant footfalls of a mountain goat half a mile away. The exact moment when a storm front approached, before any cloud appeared in the sky. He had waited a very long time. He had made the right choice. It was Doro who pointed out, on the 5th day, that the grand choosing ceremony was in 2 days. You should enter, he said. With Solen. They'll laugh, Moja said flatly. Probably, Doro agreed. But you should enter anyway. The grand choosing was held in the great stone courtyard at the center of Valarath's capital city, which was 3 days' journey from Moja's village by foot, and as it turned out about 40 minutes by dragon. Moja had never ridden anything before. Not a horse, not a cart, not even a swing. But when she climbed onto Solen's back for the first time using the network of ridges along his left side like a staircase, her hands reading each scale the way fingers read words, and felt his muscles gather beneath her like the whole world drawing a deep breath. She was not afraid. She leaned forward, pressed her palm to the base of his neck, and felt the question in him. Ready? She answered by holding on. The takeoff was extraordinary. Not smooth, nothing real and powerful is smooth. It was a controlled explosion, wind slamming air into submission, the ground dropping away like a stone into a well, cold wind replacing warm earth in an instant. Moja felt the change in air pressure on her face, the tilt and cant of Solen's body as he angled upward, and she adjusted her weight the same way she balanced on uncertain ground with her whole body listening. Doro, riding behind her, screamed for the first 40 seconds and then fell into awed, wind-swept silence. They arrived at the capital just as dawn was breaking. Even Moja could sense the size of it, the sounds of thousands of people, the smell of food and smoke and metal and livestock, the warm weight of many buildings holding the air differently than open land. She heard flags snapping in the wind above the courtyard, heard the clang of ceremonial armor, heard the murmur of a crowd already gathering. She heard, also, the muttering that began the moment Solon landed. Is that a new dragon? I've never seen that color. Who is the rider? She looks as if she from a noble house. She's not even looking at the crowd. Is something wrong with her eyes? Moja climbed down from Solon with easy confidence. She found the ground with her staff, straightened her back, and tilted her face toward the center of the courtyard where she could hear the dragon masters gathered. I am Moja of the Whispering Forest, she announced, her voice carrying clearly across the stone. I have come to enter the grand choosing. Silence. Then laughter, sharp, dismissive, a little cruel. She's blind. Someone called from the crowd. A blind rider. Another voice. That's never been done. It can't be done. The head dragon master, an older woman named Elder Oises, stepped forward. Her voice was careful and not unkind. Child. The choosing requires a rider to meet a dragon's gaze, to hold the connection of eyes. It is a sacred bond. Solon and I have a bond, Moja said quietly. I would ask that you test it. Another ripple through the crowd. Someone pointed out that Solon was not a registered dragon, that no one had ever seen him before. The dragon masters conferred in low voices. Moja stood still, her hand resting lightly on Solon's flank, feeling the steady hum of his calm beneath her fingers. He was not anxious. He was patient. He had waited centuries. He could wait a few more minutes. Elder Oises raised her hand for quiet. Very well, she said. You will face the trial. But know this, the trial has 3 parts, and never in all history has a rider completed all 3 without full sight. I know, said Moja. I'll do it anyway. The first part of the trial was the flight of the bells. A rider must guide their dragon through a course marked by hanging bells, triggering each one in order without missing any. Sighted riders used the visual markers on the bells. Moja used something else. She had asked Doro to describe the course layout to her once, committed it to memory, and then on Solon's back she did something no one expected. She sang, not loudly, barely a hum. But Solon felt the vibration of it through her chest against his neck, and learned from it the same way she had taught him: pattern, rhythm, direction. She hung higher when she wanted him to rise, lower when she wanted him to drop, left tilting when she wanted him to bank left. And her ears tracked the bells, the whisper of each one as they approached, the tiny chime of contact, every bell. In order. Not one missed. The crowd had gone very quiet indeed. The second part of the trial was the combat circle. Every rider in the history of the grand choosing had dreaded it. You and your dragon were placed in a wide ring, and a trained war dragon controlled by a dragon master would attack. The goal was not to defeat the war dragon. The goal was to survive for 2 minutes without leaving the circle, and to show that rider and dragon could act as one in a crisis. Most pairs were scored on instinct, aggression, and speed of response. Dragon masters watched for the bond, the invisible thread of trust between a rider and their mount that made them move as a single creature. Moja had been thinking about this part since she first heard Doro describe the trial 3 days ago. It was the one that concerned her most. Not because of the danger. Moja had a high tolerance for danger, having navigated a world built for sighted people her entire life. What concerned her was timing. She couldn't see the war dragon coming, but Solon could, and she could feel Solon. She had spent 3 days refining their language. Every muscle twitch now meant something. A tightening in his left shoulder meant threat approaching from the left. A drop of his head meant incoming low attack. The sharp single vibration she learned on the first day. Alertness came in different intensities now. Mild alert. Strong alert. Immediate alert. When the war dragon entered the circle, she felt Solon's body read like a sentence. Strong alert approaching fast from the right high. She leaned hard left and hummed the drop signal. Solon ducked and rolled. The war dragon's wing cut air where they had been half a second before. The crowd exhaled as one. Again and again the war dragon came. A feint from below. A charge from the left. A sudden burst of training fire controlled. but hot enough to be real. Each time, Moja read Solan's body like a map, and Solan read Moja's signals like instructions. They had no sight. They had something better, complete, total attention to each other. 2 minutes felt like 2 seconds. When the horn sounded to end the combat circle, Moja and Solan were still in the ring. Not a scratch on either of them. The silence that followed was different from the silence before. This one had weight to it. This one was thinking. Elder Alwises's voice, when it came, was carefully composed. The third trial, she announced, is the heart reading. The heart reading was the most intimate of the three and the one Moja had worried about least. It required a rider to place both hands on their dragon's chest, close their eyes, and describe what the dragon was feeling. It was meant to test the depth of the bond, whether a rider truly knew their dragon's emotional state or was merely guessing. Moja almost laughed. She slid from Solan's back. She knelt before him, pressed both palms flat against the warm scales of his chest. She closed her eyes, an action that cost her nothing, and she listened. His heart was steady. Not anxious, not aggressive. There was warmth, not the physical warmth of his scales, but the emotional kind, the kind that had no word in any language she knew except perhaps belonging. There was also something she hadn't felt before in quite this form. Pride. Not the cold pride of victory, but the warm kind, the kind that comes from being seen clearly, being understood, being chosen not despite who you are but because of it. Moja spoke quietly, her voice carrying to the masters and the watching crowd. He is calm. He is proud. He is home. She paused. And so am I. A sound ran through the crowd, not laughter this time. Something rougher and more honest than that. The sound of people reconsidering something they had always believed. Elder Alwises walked slowly to where Moja knelt before Solan. The old woman stopped. She looked at the dragon. Solan looked back at her, those ancient amber eyes, patient and certain. I have been a dragon master for 40 years, Elder Alwises said, very quietly. I have never seen heart reading this strong. She raised her voice so the courtyard could hear. I have also never seen a dragon bow until today, when I saw this one bow to this girl. Not in submission. In recognition. She stepped back. The trial is complete. But before the crowd could respond, before the ceremony could continue, the ground trembled. And then the sky turned wrong, dark. Fast. Wrong. The scouts on the city walls began to shout. In the north, where the sky met the mountains, 3 shadows were rising, enormous and purposeful, blocking out the morning sun. Not trained dragons. Wild ones. Rogue war dragons, displaced from their territory by a rock slide the week before, now maddened and angry and heading directly for the capital city of Valarath. The dragon masters looked at each other. Their own trained monks were stabled and not yet prepared. The ceremony dragons were ceremonial, not fighters. The crowd began to panic, and Moja was already climbing back onto Solan's back. 3 rogue dragons against 1 girl and 1 dragon. The mathematics, as Daro shouted from the courtyard below, were extremely unfavorable. Moja ignored him completely. She leaned forward over Solan's neck as he climbed the sky in great powerful wave-beats, the cold air tearing at her braid, the city falling away below her in sound, the screaming, the bells, the drumming of boots on cobblestone. Up here, above all of that, everything became simple. The wind. Her hands. Solan's heartbeat. The 3 rogue dragons were not attacking in formation. They were confused and frightened and angry. The rock slide had destroyed their nesting ground, their eggs, their territory. They were not evil. They were grieving, and grief in a dragon comes out as fire. Moja understood this in her bones. She had spent her whole life being told she was wrong, that the way she moved through the world was insufficient, that she was missing something essential. She knew what it felt like to have your home taken from you by forces you couldn't control, and to want to burn something in response. They're not attacking, she said aloud, more to herself than to Solan. They're grieving. They need to be heard, not fought. Solan understood this too. She felt it in him, not the sharp readiness of combat, but something slower and more deliberate. Agreement. She made a decision that no dragon master in history had ever made in a crisis like this one. She did not attack. She did not flee. She flew directly toward the 3 rogue dragons, at half speed, with Solan's fire glands deliberately closed and his wings angled in a posture she had learned from touching him, from learning his body was a dragon's signal for, I am not a threat. I see you, the rogue circled. Confused. This was not what prey did. This was not what enemies did. Moja pressed both palms to Solan's neck and let him speak, not with fire or roar, but with the low resonant hum she had first heard in the cave. The sound that had pulled her to him across mountains and through forest. Solan broadcasted all word now, aimed at the 3 circling dragons, and it said in the only language they all shared, I know. I am sorry for what you lost. You are seeing. One rogue dragon veered off first. Then the second. The third hovered, wings beating slowly, looking at Moja with eyes the size of wagon wheels, golden and anguish and very, very tired. Moja reached out one hand toward it, palm up. The same gesture she had made to Solan in the cave. Let it decide. Never force it. The rogue dragon exhaled a gust of smoke. Circled once. Then lowered its head, not all the way, not to the ground, but enough. A small ball. Acknowledgement. Then all 3 turned and flew north, back toward the mountains, to find a new place to begin again. The courtyard below had gone completely silent. Moja brought Solan back down in a wide, slow spiral. When they landed, the silence continued for a long, strange moment. Then it broke not into cheering, exactly, but into something fuller than that. The sound of a crowd that has just seen the world rearrange itself around a new truth. Elder Oasis was waiting when Moja dismounted. The old Dragon Master's voice, for the first time, was not carefully composed. It was simply honest. You didn't fight them. Fighting them would have been wrong, Moja said. They weren't our enemies. The Dragon Masters, all of us, we would have fought. It's what we're trained to do. I know, said Moja. I couldn't see them coming with weapons, so I had to figure out what they were actually feeling instead. Elder Oasis was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that would be repeated in Valorath for generations afterward. Perhaps that is why we needed someone who could not see. The formal declaration was made that afternoon, in the great hall of Valorath's capital, before the assembled Dragon Masters and the gathered crowd. The words were old, ceremonial, carved into stone above the hall's entrance and spoken aloud at every choosing since the beginning of the kingdom. Elder Oasis recited them now, and added one that had never been spoken before. From this day, let it be known, strength does not come only from sight. It comes from listening, from trust, from learning to speak a language the world did not offer you, from finding a bond so true it needs no proof beyond itself. Moja stood straight in the hall, Solan beside her, his amber eyes warm and steady. Doro, somewhere in the crowd, was crying. He would later claim it was an allergic reaction. From that day forward, Moja and Solan flew together across every corner of Valorath. They mediated between dragons and villages, found lost travelers in blizzards, helped rogue dragons relocate to new territories. They were called in when communication had failed, when force had only made things worse, when a situation needed someone who could hear what others were too loud to notice. The children of Valorath grew up with a new story. Not the story of the rider who struck the hardest or flew the fastest or had the keenest eyes. The story of Moja, the listener, the girl who had found the oldest, greatest dragon in the kingdom not by looking for him, but by being quiet enough to hear him looking for her. And every child who heard that story, whether they could see or not, learned something they would carry for the rest of their lives. The world has a heartbeat. Most people are too busy looking to hear it, but those who listen, they find the dragons, the end.